I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby here with Corey Hawkins, who plays Macduff in the brilliant new adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth. And Corey, I wanted to, Macduff is one of those characters that he becomes a major character really towards the second half of the play. He only really has like one or two small scenes before those big dramatic scenes. So from an acting standpoint, how do you approach a character like that, knowing that you have to make that big impact, later in the film?
Well, for me, it's more of the sort of dramatic sort of scenes or big impact. They come where they come. You know what I mean? And so my job is just to sort of follow the roadmap, and not to sort of make it to be too precious, I think, with it, which sometimes can be a trap, especially with the sort of role like Macduff and opposite, Macbeth. And so for me, it was just about just allowing it to be where it is, man. The truth of his circumstances. I mean, finding out what he finds out, when he finds out, and how he finds it out. And then the magic of sort of Joel just allowing space for it. I mean, I think especially in the first sort of big scene where he finds out about his family. I mean, I think there's rage, I think, is familiar. Anger is familiar, but what isn't necessarily familiar is allowing yourself as a man and watching someone sort of piece together the fact that as his world is sort of crumbling around him, watching him sort of pick up the pieces and actually figure out where and what's going on. You know what I mean? It's a bit of an impossible situation, but you have to sort of allow him to be where he is. And like I said, it was just about using the roadmap of this incredible play, this incredible adaptation that Joel put together, and just trusting the journey will get me to where it needs to get me to, versus, here it comes,
Yeah, there's that great line where Malcolm says to Macduff, dispute it like a man, and Macduff says, true, I will do so, but I have to feel it like a man. And it's like, and Shakespeare gives his characters just in general, and you've done Shakespeare before, both on stage, and so what do you think is the key to unlocking? Because a lot of people approach Shakespeare from a very kind of distant perspective. What's been kind of your approach diving in to the language?
For me, and this has always been sort of something. It's a journey I'm still on in trying to. I mean, I like to dive in Catherine Hunter's mind, and we, just talking to her just about language in the text and what this new form of speaking Shakespeare, playing Shakespeare, and what that looks like, in the ownership that we actually have on it, over it, and the dialogue and the conversation with it. It is something that, I used to see as this dusty relic, right, that sits on the shelf, and, only certain people are allowed to discuss it and tell us what it should be and how it should be said, and the, iambic pentameter and what that means, and this and that. And all of that is just a roadmap, like I said earlier, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it comes down to what you get out of it. I mean, he was a poet. That's what he was. He was literally a poet of the streets. And I say this all the time, but I equate him in the same way that certain people don't understand hip hop. Certain people just don't get it. It doesn't negate the validity of it. It's just there's a way in that certain people have, and there's a musicality to it that certain people understand and get. But at the end of the day, both forms conjure up certain images, sometimes the same images: murder, politics, poverty, escapism, like trying to ambition. It's all the same themes. So part of that was like finding that marriage and being able to technically be able to do it. You have to be able to technically speak the speech, and so that was it, man. Just like you said, the clues. It's all about the clues. Shakespeare leaves these little clues, and that's why I say, you know, it's sometimes easy to go to a place that feels familiar, especially with Macduff, and especially in that scene. But for me, it goes before, you know, before Malcolm says the line about, you know, putting on the manly business. For me, it was just hearing the text from Ross. Ross is literally telling him that his wife, and all of his children have just been murdered, after telling him that they're okay, by the way. So
yeah,
you know, you know, it's such a weird thing to do to someone. And so there's confusion in that. And there's, again, trying to figure, and then you see Macduff, literally, it's in the text. He's trying to piece it together. He says, my wife, all of my children, he says, yes, all of them, my pretty babes. Yes. My wife too. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
It's not getting in. Something is not happening. And then at the very end, and I think this is so key to who he is as a character, at the very end of that, he does not blame Macbeth. He blames sinful Macduff. He blames himself. And so it just gave me another way of looking at this character, that sometimes where I could just dig with the nuance, you know what I mean, and play. And again, I have ownership over it just as much as anyone else does. So why not? And Joel allowed me the opportunity to explore all of the levels of it. And that's where we ended up with it.
Well, and that, I think, is what kind of makes Shakespeare so interesting, is because it has been done in different venues and different films and different adaptations. So are you the type of actor that when you know, like, a role has been done, you know, that you're playing, do you think about those previous interpretations, or are you the type that tries to keep that out of your mind?
No, you certainly, I mean, it's interesting because you'd be, on one hand, foolish not to sort of look at the past and know all of the great adaptations of this play. Joel certainly has. I mean, you know, the film is heavily influenced, you know, Kurosawa, and I mean, it's just incredible, the scope of the film and how this version is a conversation with a lot of those films. And so in a way, this Macduff is in the same conversation with a lot of, you know, the other Macduffs that I've seen. And so, but on the other hand, you have to sort of be free enough to, and open enough to just trust that this is where he is okay. And like you said, there isn't that much real estate. You know, he's not, you know, espousing and doing all this, and it's not a flashy sort of character. But there is something, I think, in him being the sort of antithesis to Macbeth that I think he's a bit of the moral compass of this play. And that innocence when you see Lady Macduff and her son and his son, and all of that. So yes and no. At the end of the day, we're just in the room, you know, toying around with. I mean, I'm sure there were rehearsals where we went, you know, guns blazing and, you know, all of the things, and then there were rehearsals when it was less that, and there were takes, I'm sure, that went a different way as well. So really, it's just the truth of where he is from what Alex and Harry were giving me, and Ross and Malcolm, in that moment for the version that ended up on the screen. You know?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the rehearsal process, because, you know, you have a background, you know, in the theater and coming from Juilliard, and I'm curious as to what this rehearsal experience was like, as opposed to, say, if this had been like a stage production. Was there any difference? Were there similarities?
Man, we started rehearsal. First of all, Denzel and Fran had been rehearsing, you know, they had been working long before we got there. I came in at the very beginning of the process when everyone else started to sort of come in and production started to ramp up. And I mean, I remember we were on the lot at Warner Brothers in this studio where there were these backdrops of all of the old films, these actual painted backdrops from all of the old, you know, films. And like, it just, there was a history in the room, and the floorboards were all torn up and it was wood. It felt like we were back in New York working in the theater. And I remember being there. I was in sort of early, so I was reading a lot of the roles where other actors hadn't came in yet. So that was just a valuable learning experience for me, being in a room with those three, just literally playing and being of service to not only them, but to the play mainly. And so that was the process. And then people started, we all started trickling in, and the Brits started trickling in. And then it just felt like we were creating this cool ass company, man. Like, sorry, I probably should this cool company. And it was play. I mean, we call it a play for a reason. It's a play. We're literally dressing up and putting on, costumes and standing in front of lights and speaking, in a different, it's just, it was that. It was failing. It was taking risks and being able to watch Joel, Denzel, Frances at this point in their career do that. And watch how the sauce gets made a little bit. Was like, it's what every actor, everyone, even if you're not an actor, if you're a fan of just the work and the craft, and it's just a dream to watch. But you tell them that, and they're like, they're so humble, you know what I mean? They're just like, we just don't know, they don't want to talk about it. But for me, it was a joy, man. It was an absolute pleasure to have that time.
Yeah. So in working with both Fran and Denzel, and especially the big climactic scene is you and Denzel, Macduff and Macbeth together. And so what was that experience like? Was that intimidating? Was it exciting? What was going through your mind during those scenes?
I don't know if it was intimidating. It was definitely, because by that point, I mean, that was also the big parapet scene, the fight that happens between Macbeth and Macduff. We were at the very end of, this was post-COVID, post the COVID shutdown. We had picked back up, and so we were at the very end of the production. And at that point, we all sort of knew where, and Joel sort of runs this tight but loose ship, tight creatively, like it's but also there's room for us to sort of come in with ideas. And that fight we beat through just like you would beat through a scene, what makes sense, how, and it was great sort of walking through that with Denzel Washington, hoping that I didn't accidentally hit him with the sword. I don't want to be the guy to kick him out. You know what I mean? Like, but even, I mean, down to the choices that were made, even in that scene, the hubris, the pride that, just the fact that in the middle of this huge fight, the thing that kills him is the fact that it's, spoiler alert, crown falls off, and he has to get it and put it back on his head. And that's the moment when, it just says a lot about, again, character and who we are as people, chasing that thing that yeah. And so there's that. There was also just again, those moments we talked about where Macduff literally, after all of this, they come face to face on this parapet, and he gives him another opportunity to surrender, after he's taken everything from him. And again, I see them as two sides of the same coin. Macduff could easily become what Macbeth is. Now he has no children. Now he has no legacy. Now he has, but there's a different fire in his belly. There's no hatred there. There's still love, and again, he won't kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet. So they have to get on with it, It's an incredible scene, man. And to be up there doing it with Denzel it was intense. It was intense.
Well, this play, it's a play that I've taught a lot. It's a play that's, regularly on the upper tier of Shakespeare plays that get produced and made into different adaptations. What is it about this play, do you think, that resonates so much that it does seem to get this kind of treatment?
Well, I'll say this. I did Romeo. I remember doing Romeo and Juliet on Broadway. And I look at a play like that and I'm like, that's just incredibly hard to do. It's an incredibly hard production. I think it's just, we're talking about this with someone recently, like, they just make some of the adults in the play just make some of the just stupidest choices. I mean, like it's just one of those things, you know, but it's an endearing play and people love, you know, but it's just hard to do. This play is a play that really is Macbeth really, it pulls, it shows who we are, man. Like it really is you know, if you're looking for a part of who we are as people, the ambition, the political ambition, it talks about so much. It is written so many years ago, but still it's so resonant to this day. We all have that thing, you know, we all want to get to a certain point in our lives and do great things. And at what point does fate sort of become, do we control fate or do we have a choice in that? And that is interesting to watch somebody toy with those things that probably shouldn't be toyed with, you know, and because we toy with them in our own lives, you know, on probably a smaller scale. We're not talking about, you know, becoming kings and queens and all of that, but you know, in our day-to-day lives, it's deep stuff, man. And it's spiritual stuff. And it's spiritual warfare, I think. And it's a thriller. And Joel, of course, it's right up his alley because it deals with those themes that he and his brother for years have been doing in film. And so to be able to, you know, that's why it just keeps, because you can always dig more from here. You can, you know, them being older in this version, what does that say? You know, just time, how that moves on. I love it, man. I love it. And that's the beauty of Shakespeare. It can hold so much. And then he made the decision to do it in black and white and with this aspect ratio. And it allows the audience to come to it in a different way, you know, the nuance of it all. I just dig it, man. It's such a good play. It's such a good.
I'm curious, you know, your career to this point, you've already managed to tackle such a variety of characters in, you know, classic theater, contemporary stuff, you know, musicals. Was it your training at Juilliard? Was that what really gave you this kind of versatility?
I think Juilliard didn't give me the versatility. I'll say that. Juilliard gave me a toolbox in order to take who I am already and the whatever's in there, and just to learn different ways of working and bringing out that versatility. I think that's what all sort of training programs give you, an opportunity to play on that level. Like, you know, I mean, I could want to do it. I could have the passion to do it, but the skill to do it, you know what I mean? So I think Juilliard added that. But I'm not too precious about it. I mean, you know, it's a very good institution and I got a lot from it. And I made incredible friendships and collaborations there. So I mean, some of my favorite actors, you know, were there with me, and you know, we're still kicking it to this day. I mean, some Juilliard cats were in the film. So anyways, so there's that. But the versatility, for me, you know, a lot of people don't know that I'm, you know, people who just saw In the Heights, you know, they're like, oh, it's Benny on the Dispatch. You know, they don't know that I played Dr. Dre. You know what I mean? They don't know that I was on 24, you know what I mean? Or The Walking Dead with a crazy wig, you know, and to be able to do that and then to jump into something like this, I just want to keep sort of surprising myself selfishly, obviously, as an actor, but also just to continue doing stuff that with great directors that challenge me. And again, like I said, watching Frances and Denzel take this risk, and it is a risk because they don't have to do a thing for the rest of their lives. I mean, but they make the choice to do something that could really fail. I mean, Joel stepping out and doing this on his own and ended up creating this masterpiece, I think, is a testament to the kind of actor that I just want to continue to be. I like being a underdog. I like sort of sliding in and sliding out and just doing my thing and doing it with people that I love, you know?
Well, please do more Shakespeare because you're quite good at it. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Oscars, Golden Globe, SAG Awards, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders throughout the season. Corey Hawkins, The Tragedy of Macbeth, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Tony. Appreciate it, man.